you all on behalf of the Rockport student government for participating in what promises to be thought-provoking and entertaining debate. Events like this are only made possible by the hard work of many folks. I'd like to single out a couple in particular. Eric May, the VSG Programming Director, Kayleen Dady, VSG Marketing Director, Wendy Fritz of the College Bookstore, Basque, and our distinguished faculty for all of their efforts for promoting and supporting the event this evening. Thank you all very much. And I hope that you're all excited about the relaunch of VSG's webpage in the spring and the return of programs like Brockport Idol, your spring concert, Brockport, and VSG Elections, which are all, like this event this evening, brought to you and supported by your VSG mandatory fee. And of course, I'd like to wish, on behalf of VSG, all of the students in attendance best of luck on their finals in the coming weeks. And now it gives me great pleasure to welcome Christopher Hitchens and Rabbi David Wolpe to Brockport to tonight's debate on the question, why does God matter? The reputations of our two distinguished speakers clearly precede them, but I will take a brief moment to introduce them. Christopher Hitchens is the author of the New York Times best-selling book, God Is Not Great, How Religion Poisons Everything, of which my favorite review was written by Esquire's Mark Warren, who said, "Thank God for Christopher Hitchens." He has been named one of the world's top 100 public intellectuals by Foreign Policy magazine, won the National Magazine Award for his contributions to Vanity Fair, and is an honorary associate of the National Secular Society. Rabbi David Wolpe is the author of Why Faith Matters and a leader in the conservative Jewish movement. As the senior rabbi at Sinai Temple in Los Angeles, he has been named the #1 pulpit rabbi in America by Newsweek magazine. He writes for several publications, including Huffington Post, The Washington Post, Jerusalem Post, The Jewish Week, and LA Times. He currently teaches at UCLA and has previously taught at Jewish Theological Seminary of America in New York and the American Jewish University in Los Angeles. The format for this evening's debate is as follows. Each of our speakers will begin with an opening statement that will last 15 minutes from the lectern. Following, each gentleman will have 10 minutes to respond to each other, and then finally they'll have closing arguments of 5 minutes. After which we'll take questions from the audience from the 2 microphones in the front here, one for questions directed towards Mr. Hitchens, and the other for questions directed towards Rabbi Wolpe. We ask that you please keep your comments concise and respectful so that we can proceed with as many questions as possible. At the end of the program, copies of both gentlemen's books will be on sale in the Union Lounge, and they'll be available to autograph them for you. So before we begin, I'd ask that you all please remain seated during the course of the debate, silence your cell phones, and offer Christopher Hitchens and Rabbi David Wolpe a warm welcome to Brockport. We're going to start with a coin flip to decide who goes first, just to ensure impartiality. Rabbi Wolpe, would you like to call the flip? Heads. Oh! Here we go. That's a tail. Indeed it is a tails, and Mr. Hitchens will begin.
Thank you for that very handsome introduction. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, for coming, for your courtesy and your curiosity on this greatest of all subjects. And thank you for giving me a reminder of the weather of the country of my birth. The hospitality of Rochester is rightly renowned. Well, it's an unusual evening for both of us in that the motion before us isn't a for or against debate question. It's a reflection on the importance of a very well-known subject. And I'll begin by saying why the concept of a deity is important to me, and why I think it's so important to show that this entity is man-made, and it shows. We are members, as we all now know, of a primate species, 1/2 chromosome away from chimpanzees. That also shows. One of the advantages we have over the other higher primates is that we have a slightly larger prefrontal lobe. Our adrenaline gland, in my view, is still too big. Our reproductive arrangements were designed by a committee. We have appendixes that we don't need. We grow hair in the womb that we shed before we're born. We're adapted to an environment, the African savanna, that we long ago very wisely abandoned. Otherwise we would, along with 99.9% of all other species that have ever been on the planet, have become extinct. Some design, by the way, some creator that arranges such grotesque mass destructions and eliminations. But I may be getting ahead of myself. With these faculties anyway, such as they are, one of our great attainments is that we are pattern seekers. We look for coincidences, for patterns, for explanations. And there's a lot around us that needs to be explained. And the great advantage of religion, I'll just call it religion for now, I'm going to separate the word God in a moment, is that it was, and for many of us still is, our first explanation for everything. Religion was humankind's first essay into cosmology. Why do the stars shine? Why did they move? Why do they sometimes disappear? It's our first attempt at philosophy, the idea of reasoning about what justice might be, how we are to live together, how we are to discuss. In some ways, it's our first attempt at literature, which is my own special subject. If I have one, it's our first real attempt at producing text that, though it is claimed to be revealed and sometimes claimed to be unalterable and divine, is nonetheless the work of man and has undergone, perforce, a great number of revisions, often at great cost. That's an attempt there too. It's an attempt at healthcare. For a very long time, people had probably a stronger chance of recovery if they went to the meeting conducted by the witch doctor. Everyone knows that morale is important in recovery. There's no question. My scientific colleagues, Richard Dawkins and Daniel Dennett, conceded with grace that it probably had a marginal but crucial effect on recovery, on health. It was our first attempt at understanding the natural order. Why are there earthquakes? Where do the comets come from? Where do the meteorites come from? Why are there tidal waves? Why are there plagues and diseases? In every case, you'll notice, though, that the answers proposed for these things by religion was wrong. In other words, the price of being the first explanation we came up with was it was also the worst. You'll do a lot better, ladies and gentlemen, with a germ theory of disease than you will if you're faced with a plague and you think it's the Jews again, poisoning the wells, or it's a punishment for homosexuality. Earthquakes actually were believed by many people to be a punishment for homosexuality, though the only one that's yet occurred in San Francisco was long before it ceased to be a heterosexual town. Now, with this enormous advantage, religion has a second order one that I think is much less creditable, shall I put it like this. Now in the light of later discoveries, we now know a great deal about our own nature. We've analyzed the string of our DNA. We know what we have in common with other creatures, and indeed with other less animate objects too. We know we're made of the same material as other animals and worms and even plants. We have a very much improved idea of the origins of the cosmos, vulgarly called a Big Bang, but everyone understanding that there was a moment of explosion that is still going on. The universe is still exploding apart at a actually very rapid and, oddly enough, increasing rate. You would have expected it to decrease by now. But it isn't doing that. And so it's become possible more recently for those who believe in the religious interpretation of the world to say, we used to oppose that. We used to say it was profane to study evolution. We used to say God put the fossils in the rocks just to test our faith. That was one ingenious attempt to counter Darwinism, for example. But now we find evolution is so beautiful and so complex and so magnificent that obviously, we should have said this earlier, but we can say it now, God is responsible for that too. Same with the extraordinary effusions of physics and cosmology. Well, only a really big brain could have caused something like this to happen. You'll see my difficulty with this, which I hope you'll share. An argument like that is by definition unfalsifiable. There's no way I can prove that that's not the case. But I was brought up to believe, as I hope you are being,